Black Gemara, we are up to Daf Nun Amid Aleph. So, in the Mishnah, Machlekes Abishmal and the Chachamim regarding Markulis. That's the unique Avodah Zarah, where it's a tripod of stones, and then you have a couple of stones next to it. So we had a Machlekes Abishmal said only if the three stones, even side by side, even the Markulis is the tripod, it's Avodah Zarah. And the Chachamim say no. It all depends on if it's close nearby or not nearby. I don't care if it's 1 stone, 2 stones, 3 stones. So basically, the last Gemara we learned was that if it's within 1 amma of the Avodah Zarah, everybody agrees that it's a part of the Avodah Zarah. Don't talk about it. If it's beyond 4 ammas of the Avodah Zarah, it's definitely not part of it. It didn't fall from the Avodah Zarah. Their argument is between 1 and 3 ammas. So the Chachamim say that it fell from the Avodah Zarah, and people also worship, the stones that come from the Avodah Zarah. And therefore even 1 stone is usher, and Rabbi Shmuel says no. Rabbi Shmuel says they used to make a mini version of a Markulis, and a mini version of Markulis could be as long as it's 3 stones. It doesn't matter if it's side by side or if it's things within 4 ammas. We'll say it's a mini version of the Markulis. So we're up to the Gemara here. Omar Mar, the 2 dots, about 7 lines from the top of the page of Nun Aleph. You just said before, if you know for a fact, if you know for a fact that it fell from the Markula, original Markula, is the Dibri Hakol Asudis. It seems to me that everyone agrees that it's us, if you know that for a fact. But I'll ask you a question. It says in the Braisa, if stones that fell off from the Markulis, and still there it says, depends. Nidas imay asudis, if it's nearby, it's asud. And she'ein nidas imay mutaris, if it's not nearby, it's mutar, even though it definitely fell from. That's already a problem. You said if it definitely fell, then it's part, it's part of the Markulis. Here, the Chachamim say that if it's not needed, it's not close by, even though it seems like we know for a fact it came from Markulis, it's not Avodah Zarah. And you said before that they worship even parts of the Markulis. That's one problem with what you said. And then Rabbi Shmuel says shalosh asturis shtayim mutaris. Rabbi Shmuel says that 2 are mutar, even though you know for a fact. And you said before that if it's within 1 amma, you know for a fact. The whole thing is stam. You said before the whole argument is only, but we don't know where it came from. So when do we make that assumption? So everything you said is wrong. Amar Rava, you know what we'll do? We'll have to amend the brisa. Don't say that you know for a fact it fell down. Change the word. You found it, and you don't know where it came from. So then it goes back to the original machlekes. According to Chachamim, worship the shvarim, and did it come from the original? So if it's close, it came from the original. If it didn't come close, it didn't come original. And Mishmal says, but they don't worship the shvarim, but it's a mini version of the Markulis. So therefore, you need 3 stones. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel, you want to tell me the Shmuel holds shtayim mutaris because it's not a mini version of the Markulis, and because he's not worried about shvarim. But Tanya, another brayse, Rabbi Shmuel says shtayim betfis lo yasuris. If you found 2 stones near the Markulis, it is asur. And shalish, but if you found 3, I feel rechakas. If you found 3, that means that it's a Markulis in its own right. It's a mini version. It's asur. But that's not the problem. The problem is it says that if it's close by 2, it's asur. You said before that Rabbi Shmuel holds up that nobody bows down to shvarim, to broken pieces. It's only if it's a mini version. I don't care if whatever where it is. Here it's clear that even 2, if it's close, it's asur. Says the Gemara, because you said before that if it's within 4 ammas, between 1 and 4, Rabbi Shmuel holds his mutar. What's going on here? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav says, Rabbi, like kasha, kan betfisa achas, kan b'shtei tfisas. Tfisa means close by. You can have a flat plane between the rocks and the Markulis. There's nothing standing in between. That's called tfisa achas. That's Rabbi Shmuel's moida. If it's within 4 ammas and it comes from the Markulis, that's his brayse here, it's asur. When we said before that if it's within 4 ammas, Rabbi Shmuel said, no, it's not asur unless we can establish it's a mini version of the Markulis. There's 3 stones there. That's to my state tfisas. No, there's a little bit of a hill. There's something in between the Markulis and this rock that you found. There's another wedge in between. So then we'd say that it's not considered part of the Avodah Zarah. Nobody's going to bother with it unless it's a mini version. It's an Avodah Zarah in its own right. The Hechel like Mark explains. There's a little mound in between this rock and the original Avodah Zarah. You're telling me that if you have 3 stones side by side, that's what Rishmael is saying. It's a mini version of Markulis, but we know that Markulis is a tripod. And the Markulis is a tripod, 2, and then 1 on top, and you're telling me 3 side by side. That's not a makulis. So you have the main makulis, which is the done correctly, and then you have a mini version next to it. And that mini version doesn't have to follow it accurately. It needs 3 stones, but even if it's parallel to each other, it's Avodah Zarah as well. It's a satellite Avodah Zarah. The Gemara tells a story. Be Yanai, in the house of Yanai Malka, Choru, it once got destroyed for whatever reason. Also, the Goyim came in and Ukme Bey Makulis, and they established the Avodah Zarah Makulis. Exactly how that happened, what's behind that story, I don't know. But what do you mean Goyim came into his place in the anyway? Unless the Romans something, I don't know. Also, the Kachavim came, other Goyim came in. They're like Paluchil. They don't believe in. There was there were different religions in the Goyim, and the Shaklinu. They took it. The Chifu behendrachim v'satray. They use as pavement on the streets in the highways. So, in other words, they're mevatel. Remember, a goy can mevatel even another goy as we had before. Even another goy is avodah zarah. A yid cannot be mevatel avodah zarah, but a goy can. So what happened was the chayda klor, a goy is mevatel, right? They took it and paved the streets. Yet, ikar rabban the pashi. Some rabban refused to go to the house in the future, and ikar rabban like pashi. And those other ones who did go in the house, or on the roads, doing on the roads. So the question is on the roads. The question is, why would the Chavchamim some so frum they wouldn't go on these roads? They were mevatel it. Benon shel kedoshim, Rabbi Yechon said. The Benon shel kedoshim, which we had a few times in Shas, who is a Menachem and so will say, Mahal chaleyen manan nifresh mehen, and we ourselves are going to separate from them. Mani Benon shel kedoshim, who are they? Menachem ben Absamoy. V'mai karle Benon shel kedoshim. Why is it called a kodesh? That filu b'tzirasa the zuzah le mistakel. He didn't even look at the coin. He didn't because there's an image. So if he was so frum, especially when it comes to Avodah Zarah, and he walked on this road, why are the people machmir? L'chayda they were vatlet. My time.
I don't know. What do you mean? He's a son. Maybe it's his father. I'm hungry. He said his father. He said he did it.
Look in Taisus, first line. Look in Taisus, first line. Benon shel kedoshim in the bottom of the page. Mahalach halem. Loshen yochid. It's only one person. He didn't look at the image of a coin. The Rabbi Menachem, we're not talking about his father. We're talking about Menachem ben Tzemai. We're talking about Menachem. V'loy al avi v'l can't get clearer than that. We're not talking about Tzemai. We're talking about Menachem itself. Yeah. So Taisa already asked the question. Look, everybody should have been Mahadir. Why he was only one? So Taisa says because the images on coins that you see constantly all the time, it's not really called Avodah Zarah anymore because every time you walk in a store, every time you look at it, you see a coin. And nevertheless, when he was from.
He's called financial relations because his father was holy.
Okay. What made his father holy? That doesn't say.
It's not like him. He came from nowhere.
Okay, very nice. Exactly. Okay, he had very good upraising. And yeah, saying about it further, the bottom line is, why were the people who wouldn't walk on these roads? They were mevatel it. Saying, you know why? Because law. Now, this is very interesting. There's 2 things. There's 3 things, actually. There's the Avodah Zarah itself. Then there's the Misham She Avodah Zarah, things that ancillary to Avodah Zarah that beautifies it, which has the same din as an Avodah Zarah. And then you have Takreivis Avodah, thing that you are makiv to Avodah Zarah. Things that you brought up, you offered Avodah Zarah is stricter than the Avodah Zarah itself, which is amazing. The Avodah Zarah you can mevatel, you can cancel. You cannot cancel the Takreivis once it was brought. No, but let's say it's still be'en. Taste that. No. By goyim saying something is consecrated. Remember, we learned before. No something is hegdish. They have to shecht it. But you took bread and you put it on the Avodah Zarah. Like these guys do. The Hindus, they put it mamash Avodah Zarah and they made the blessings and everything else. That's like that crazy Avodah Zarah. The examples that Taisa, it's a long Taisa, they're fascinating. About Taisa talks about, let's say, candles. They have candles in churches. They light up the church. What's the gather of that? Is that considered takreivis Avodah Zarah? That's Avodah Zarah. And Taisa wants to say that it's not takreivis; it's for the Avodah Zarah itself to make it nice. And therefore, if it burns out on its own, they want to sell it. There's no bittul. But if the church then extinguishes the fire, that's bittul. And then they sell you're allowed to buy the candles from a church. Because Avodah Zarah is easier to, which is a pelvic thing, counterintuitive. You would think if a Hitakrevis is also you came about, what about the Avodah Zarah itself? That'd be a voice. No. So this is what he says here. He says here, they hold that which you bring to Avodah Zarah, Shein Lo B'Gibzei Lo B'Kilei Cancer. Number 7. He talked about Porva Yochel Divchei Mesim. We compare it to Divchei Mesim. What do you know about a mace? Ma mace ain't about Allah. You can never cancel it. After Grovei ain't about Allah. You can never cancel it. Umandelay Parish nu. So how come Taka others walked on it? It's a good point. L'chayda, how come they weren't worried about this? So he says here, they say in order to qualify to be considered takrevis, it has to be b'ina ke'ein panim. That just like what we do in the Beis Hamikdash, lahavdil, and we bring like a carbon, that's called takrevis. So then, if you do that, you shecht an animal and you want to not buy the meat, for example. They shechted it properly, and you want to buy the meat. So it's also because you did like ke'ein avodah panim, you shechted animals. And since stones is not something that we ever bring in the Beis Hamikdash, so therefore there's no avodas pnim, and therefore it's not takrevis avodah zarah putting stones there. It becomes avodah zarah itself. Avodah zarah itself cancelled. Baba, you came on our place. Also, I see to be a brayso with him, and he brought a brayso, and he made an interesting comment. This is the brayso that he brought. If a guy took stones away from the makulis, remember they keep on adding stones. Once you have a makulis, people keep on adding stones. So the question is, how do we treat these additional stones? So the first one says it's considered takrevis avodah chavim. Exactly, but the other chavim held that this is avodah zarah itself. Why? Because there's no such avodah between bringing stones. We don't have such an avodah, so therefore it becomes part of avodah zarah. Avodah zarah you can cancel. So the Braisa says a guy who brought stones from makulis, the chifim and drachim and you pave the streets. Is mutaris Yisrael. It's mutaris. It's mutar for you to walk on it. Why? Because they're going with atlet. But Yisrael shehevi avodim. He brought it. We keep him derochet. As soon as us. Why? Because he can't cancel exactly. And then he says the less nager, the lay bar nager. There's not a nager. Now nager nor is a carpenter or the son of a carpenter. But Rashi says chacham ben chacham. Not sure how a carpenter is the same expression for a chacham, a euphemism, but there's no one out here, even if his father, no, but the family of chachamim, Yifrakinu, who can explain this brayso. So now the Gemara will discuss what's the problem with the brayso that needs explaining and why can't we explain it. Oh, but I'm no, I'm a nobody. And I'm not sure why he's saying his father's nobody, but I'm a nobody. And I can answer. Because my kushale, I think I know what the question is. His question is that the question is these stones is takrevis, he cannot cancel it. So what's going on there? How can you walk on the streets? And I know the answer. Could be in the Beit Pnim, like we said before. It's not takrevis because there's no avodah inside the Beis Hamikdash of bringing stones. So therefore, what is it? Avodah Zarah itself. No, so no problem. I think that's what he was talking about, and I have no issue with it. Rabba continued. Rabba came to my place. He brought a brayso with the following. And this is where he made this comment. You're allowed to take the worms out. In the year of Shemitah, you're not allowed to plant trees, you're not allowed to work with trees, but you're permitted to sustain the trees, to make sure it prevents it from dying. You're not allowed to enhance the trees. You're not allowed to make anything to improve the growth, but you're allowed to prevent it from exactly. So matlin, you're allowed to take out the worms from the trees. You shouldn't kill the tree. And and also that if there's any kind of a wound or some kind of something wrong with the tree, you're allowed to bandage it and cover it up so that it should stay healthy. And they would put some kind of fertilizer to fill it up in order to prevent the tree from dying. So you're allowed to do that b'shmita. But the ein matlin you're not allowed to do that. And kan and sai shmita sai chalmoid ain't migazmin. You don't go ahead and prune trees. And the purpose of that is to grow better, faster. You can't do that, obviously. And what was it? And God v'sachin shemen, and you're allowed to smear oil ligozum if already the tree has chopped branches and it might kill the tree. So then you're allowed to cover up the branch with the oil, so the tree should prevent it from dying. Now, and this is not called avodas karkas permitted. Nobody can explain this. All this humility here. I'm a nobody. But I'll answer you. Makakasha, what's bothering you? His problem is, why are you making a distinction between Chalamoid and Yom Tov and Shemitah? How come a Chalamoid you're not allowed to do these things, and yet on Shemitah that you're allowed to? Is that what's bothering you? Because on Shemitah you're allowed to take the worms out, and you're allowed to, and so you're allowed to cover over the hole. And it says that you're now doing a Chalamoid. That's what's bothering you. I'll tell you what. Me domi shvius malacha asrachmana. The trader said on Shemitah you now do a malacha, but tircha shari. Shemitah, if it's only problem here is you're not making the trees better, you're just preventing from dying, and it's not called a malacha at all what you're doing because you're not improving the trees, so you make sure it doesn't die, and it's a bother. We didn't say now do work of Shemitah. But Moyed, I feel tircha nami yasir. Moyed is furthermore, even tircha is forbidden as well. That kind of malach, any malach. What's bothering you is ziyum versus gizum. Why is it that ziyum you're allowed to cover the tree, the holes of the tree, and why can't you prune the trees? And again, what's the problem? Ziyum ukumilon. All you're doing is make sure the tree maintain it. Vishari and gizum. What do you do when you're pruning the tree? Is avrilana. You want to make the tree better, but also you're not going to improve the tree. That's I'll do that. So that can be what's bothering him. What's bothering him is ziyum and ziyum. That's ziyum azim kakashle. Tani, it says what's bothering him. What's the problem? The Tani matlin umazayim b'shit. This price says you're allowed to do that the year of Shemitah for a minu. And our question is mizamin es hanatiyas. It says in the Brisa, you're allowed to be mezayim the young plants, and the karchin oison, and you're allowed to wrap them around, and the koitmin oison, and you're allowed to go ahead and to pick up the tops. But oison and bottom, and you're allowed to go ahead and make them a little fence around them. Let me go the fence around and put more soil, whatever it is. Umashkin, but there it says the same thing he said before. You're allowed to, but the difference is here it says umashkin oisan ad Rosh Hashanah. You're allowed to do them the 6th year until Rosh Hashanah. Normally we say 30 days before you have to stop, but that's only Midrabanan, and therefore we allow you to go over to Rosh Hashanah. But mashma ad Rosh Hashanah only till Rosh Hashanah. But the year Shemitah you now do that. Before you said you're allowed to do all these things to make sure the tree is all right, and then said you're not allowed to do that. And Teish already asked Anashi the 3 days before his Mahatoida, because Teish was Shemitah. Rabbi Kiva learned the Chodesh v'Katz and Tishba. He's talking about the year Shemitah. What it means only Midrabanan. According to Rashi, you can answer that Mahatoida is not 30 days. Mahatoida maybe it's only a little bit, and the Chachamim added more time, 30 days. Yeah, it's like Teish Shabbos. According to some Mahatoida, it's only for a minute, and then if we add more. That's the one. The deal, Mr. says, that's not a kasha. The deal, maybe the follow today, there's two kinds of ways of digging around an olive tree. One is to improve the tree, grow better, that's forbidden. Or the to cover over the holes, and that's permitted because you're maintaining the tree. Same logic I'll use here. Today, zihamume have that two kinds of zihamumes, and one is chad leukmilana, one is to prevent the tree from falling apart. Which is again, if there's a wound in the tree, you want to fill it up so that it doesn't die. And the chad lavrilana is forbidden. So what's bothering you? Smearing the oil bothers him. What's the problem? The Tony here it says sachin shemen legazum, that if it's already cut, let's say some branches, you're allowed to put oil so that the tree doesn't die. Bein b'moyed, bein b'shvi, chalamoid or shmita. But I mean, we learned sachin as a pagin, you're allowed to cover over these underripe, what do you call underripe figs. What do you call it? Umanakvi, a lot of sachin plugin. Umanakvi and mefatmin oison, and you're allowed to fill up all the, you'll make holes, and you're allowed to fill up all the holes with oil. Ad Rosh Hashanah, till Rosh Hashanah. It seems like Ad Rosh Hashanah Yimishir Loi. Same thing. Not near Shemitah. And here you say you're allowed to put oil on the branches. Halanchi, the same thing. Here you just maintain the tree. Also, you're trying to make the potatoes grow fatter and look juicier. I'll tell you what bothers me about Yimios. Sicha de moyed aziyim de megashli. On Chalamoid, you don't allow ziyim, but you allow sicha. I don't understand. Both of them. I want to maintain the tree. So why is this permitted? And this is also. And Hainu to Gomelin. This is what he said. And this is what he said that you're allowed to be sach shemen, and you now do ziyim. Both of there to prevent the tree from dying. So why chalamoid? Within chalamoid itself, how come sometimes you're allowed to and not allowed to? Nobody can explain. Is sorry, Avodah Zarah, that one of the ways is of serving it is by using a stick. No. Using a stick. Let's say you bang the sticks in front of it. There's some job with a stick. Then if Shalom Makol B'Fanev, you broke the stick, chayiv. Why you chayiv? L'chayr, it's not the normal avodah. There's two conditions for avodah, one or the other. Either it's a normal avodah for this avodah, who cares what it is, like a balpoy defecating from the, or if you do one of the avodas, that's in beprim, that's in the base of mikdash. L'chayr, breaking a stick is not the avodah there, because they used to bang the sticks, and nor is it avodah in the base of mikdash. So the chiddush of Rav Huna ben Avi is, since it's similar to avodah base of mikdash, no, it's like this. This is how Rashi learns. Since using a stick has a shaykhis to avodah zarah, okay, banging it, but has a shaykhis. Then we look at prim. We shecht an animal. You break the neck. You're breaking the stick. It is asr. Other Rishonim hold that even if there was no avodah with a stick whatsoever, just if you break a stick, which is like shechting, is enough to say if you're doing it to worship an idol, it's avodah zarah. So why talk about that there's already an avodah with a stick? I'll tell you in a minute what they say. If you threw the stick, you're potter. You're through the stick of potter. And that's the chiddush here, that even though there's an avodah with a stick, this is what they hold, who argue with Rashi. There's an avodah with a stick and avodah zarah, but if you're throwing it, since there's no such avodah b'fnim, so therefore you're not over. So Abai asks a simple question. What do you mean? In the base of mikdash, you shecht an animal, then you sprinkle the blood. So there's throwing in the base of mikdash. If you're going to say any avodah similar base of mikdash, why aren't you chai for throwing the stick in front of the avodah zarah if you're doing it to worship the idol? Interesting that Abai and Rabba have discussion, usually to Abai and Rabba. Ma'ishna sheva breaking the like shechting, nu zorek nam have like zika. Comes when Rava makes a chiddush. Zrika, when you take blood and you throw it, it breaks apart. When is zrika like avodah prim? If it breaks apart. But a stick, if a stick, you throw the whole stick, it stays one piece. That's not that avodah we don't have. Yeah, exactly. But like we don't have that. So ask you a quick question. It says, "Suffers latoya." Let's say if you poured it, you fed it soya, excrement, dung. You poured in front of it a thing of urine. Chayiv, you are chayiv, even though it's not the normal avodah. And according to Rashi, it had to be, you had to do something with urine avodah zarah, but not pouring, something else. So because zika mishtaberes, when you pour it, it breaks apart. It's liquid. And that's like avodah prim, and the way Rashi learned there had to be some avodah with urine with this avodah zarah, something else. According to other shame, didn't have to be at all. Since it's similar to the avodah base, it's enough. Elot soya dung, my zika mishtaberes zika. You throw you fed it with dung. What is it? You throw it stays in one piece. And if you want to know, it doesn't. It's soya lacha. If it's very moist, it falls apart. It breaks apart. And we'll continue tomorrow more on this subject here. Have a good day. Continue tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem.
Thanks. Bye.